Hello, everybody. Welcome to this History News Live. I can see some people already in the chat. So we will just do our hellos to some people first. Hello, Laurie. Thank you. We have got a fun time ahead. For those of you who have seen the community tab post, the one before the last one I made, you may have a sneaky peek of one of our ding-dongs. Hi, MJ. Thanks for joining. However long you stay for, you are very welcome. Thank you for making the time. Hello, Dorothy. Welcome. Hi, Lizzie. Becky, thank you so much for joining. Hello, Aurora. Thank you. I'm so happy you're here too. Hi, Paige. Thank you so much for joining. Evening, Scarlett. Thank you. Hello, Steve. Thank you ever so much. It's so wonderful to see so many lovely friends here. I'm just going to do the regular, I suppose, housekeeping. Thank you for those of you who are joining live. I've made the time to come down, and for everybody who is watching on the playback, thank you as well for taking the time. We do have our usual setup. We've got some updates. We've got some repatriation / decolonisation news. We've got some new news. We do have some ding-dongs, and we have some events and exhibitions to talk about. All of the news items that we are talking about today are on the Opera pin board that is linked in the description box. You will also notice that beneath that, the articles have been listed in the description box as well, and they are numbered. Those numbers do correspond to the slides that will be going up on the screen. So the number at the bottom of the slide, 1, 2, 3, onwards, you know how numbers work. That does correspond to the numbered articles in the description box beneath this video. I've had lots of people sending me articles. I also got sent a link. Last time we met, there was a lot of chat in the group about a Ravelry group. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And the Ravelry group is also linked in the description box. And the name of that group is Reading the Past Fibre Artists. That's what the link is. So if you are part of Ravelry, a member of Ravelry, someone who attends Ravelry, and you are a crocheter or other form of fibre artist, then there is a space for you on there. And I hope it's a good time. I clearly don't know what it is, but it sounds like there's a lovely community of people over there to have a chat with, type with. How can you? Not sure you can type whilst doing crochet, but I stand to be corrected. I do want to thank everybody for sending me the articles. It really, as I always say, every time, it means so much that people spot an article and it makes them think of me, and then they take the time to send that article to me. I'm incredibly grateful. I did also see lots of articles coming in yesterday and today. I made this, I've been out for the 9 days of half term. I've been at the Tower of London being a ghost. It was intense. So I have been doing this, making this slideshow on the evenings, in the evenings. That's how words work. So some things haven't been put in because I wanted to get it finished so that we were all ready to go for today. So if I've missed it, I haven't seen it yet, then I will certainly put it in the next one. The thing I want to just flag up is that Twitter is increasingly becoming functionally unusable for me swiftly in the way that I used to like to use it. I'm finding it much more. My husband just brought me a cup of tea. Thank you, darling. My husband is also in a hoodie. He looks very sad. I hope he's okay. Oh, he fell asleep putting our son to bed. That's why he looks like death warmed up. The way that I like to read things as a dyslexic, the new Twitter, X, is, I find it very confusing to keep track of what's going on in terms of like my mentions and things. So I don't think it's going to be very long before I'm just not really on there very much. Also, it is a screaming hellscape of misery. So if people could just send them to my email for now, that would be great. I am working on something that will be more sensible altogether, but that probably won't be till the new year until we figure out how to do what I want to do, because I think it will make everything more streamlined and purposeful. So yeah, I am finding it hard to use, and I'm seeing a lot of people in the comments saying all sorts of things that they feel the same about X/Twitter. Something about Blue Sky. I don't know how that works either. I'm on Threads, but it's not quite the same. I feel like I'm on YouTube, I'm on email, I'm on TikTok, and I do a bit of Instagram, and some of those are much better for receiving news than others. And email is probably the one. So, with that being said, I just want to flag that up. If it feels like I'm not on Twitter a lot, that's correct, because it's miserable over there. So I'm going to pop our. Let's just change that layout there. And here we go. We're going to start with our thanks, as we always do. I want to say a massive thank you. These are all wonderful people who have sent me articles. I want to say thank you to Yvonne, to Daniella, to Kathy, to Felem, to Elverta, Jessie, Shane, Kenny, Joseph, to Cindy, Kathryn, Name Twin Cat, to Karolyn, Scarlett OhHaHa, Jarrod, Verity, Alicia, Katy, Mrs. Pretty's Maid, Paige, Perpetual Mourner, Beth, Elaine, Annette, and Adventures from Shalott. Thank you all so much. I am very, very grateful. And as we always do, we are now going to hop in to the updates. So let's go. This article is an update from a very, very long time ago. I think that I talked about this sale perhaps before I started going live. And I started doing the History News live this January. So we are talking at least last year. But I remember an auction, the Sotheby's auction, where these sections of stained glass from Notre Dame were being sold at auction, and we talked about it, and I did at the time think it was odd, but it was being well publicized, so I didn't think it was that shifty. Little did I know, sweet summer child that I was, just how shady it could be. So now French authorities are investigating a sale by Sotheby's of a pair of stained glass sections that it's claimed were actually stolen from Notre Dame as far back as 1862. These polychrome glass roundels were sold in 2015. They sold separately. One of the roundels fetched €123,000, which roughly estimates to $132,000. The other one went for €111,000 or $119,000. In the catalogue, it was acknowledged that they were made in around 1250. They were 16 inches in diameter, and that they had once been part of the rose window in the northern transept of the cathedral. That they were dismantled and then replaced when the architect Eugene Vollard de Leduc restored the building. It's in the provenance, they claim these pieces were then sold sometime between 1877 and 1905. However, now we're hearing that the legitimacy of this sale is being called into question, and French police have in fact started a probe. There was a legal complaint filed back in September by the French Association Spotlight on Heritage. They allege that these roundels were never Vollard-le-Duc to sell, because anything that was taken from the cathedral in fact belonged to France. I think that's a fair. He's hired to do restoration work. He's not hired to flog medieval stained glass. That's not a perk of the job, babe. So that time the cathedral belonged to the state, because it belonged to the state since the time of the Revolution, we're told. So anything taken in the 19th century was therefore not belonging to anybody but the state, so it's theft from the state. Sotheby's said that as it was not contacted by this association before the complaint was filed, it has also denied any wrongdoing. Sotheby's claims to have complied with all applicable laws, regulations, and restrictions wherever they operate in the world. Before offering a property for sale, they conduct research and they do due diligence as appropriate to satisfy ourselves that there are no legal obstacles. Prior to offering these pieces at auction, we obtained all required permissions and export certificates from the relevant authorities, as well as alerting the experts and museum curators. According to France's law of preemption, the state and its national museums have the right to buy any cultural goods before they are sold to the public via auction or private sale, although it must match the winning bid. So we'll see where that goes. I'm sure there will be another update on that, and I'll let you know when we know what's going on with it. We've got an update on the British Museum. Unsurprisingly, the news is breaking that they are now digitising their entire collection in response to recent thefts. I don't think that this is a surprise to anybody. I have questions about this because, let's be clear, to digitise the entire collection is going to be an enormous undertaking. If they're going to do it with any sense of rapidity or pace, it's going to require taking on, at least on a temporary basis for maybe a couple of years, an enormous new body of staff. Who's paying for it? Is there going to be a large influx of new funding, or is funding going to be diverted from elsewhere? And if so, where, and what does that mean? Those are my questions. We are talking 8 million pieces that are going to be digitized. This is going to be fabulous. Not only will it increase security, but it's also going to increase public access. I think then a wider conversation needs to be had about use of those images in things like thesis, PhD theses, open access articles, things that are done not for profit. I think that when something is part of a national collection, those images should be made available to researchers and scholars creating work that then furthers the benefit and benefits the generation of knowledge, would be my opinion. We shall see. I'm sure this conversation is going to happen ongoing. There is going to be the documentation upload of more than 2.4 million records, and they think they're going to be able to do this in just over 5 years. The expectation is that by 2029, there is going to essentially be a virtual version of the British Museum online. Now, is it possible? Yes, but once again, my question remains is, where is this money going to come from? And in this article, it does say, quote, however, the museum doesn't currently have the money to complete the project, though it vows to raise the funds via private investors and not by asking the taxpayers or the British government. The museum has already digitised half of its collection as part of a project that started back in 2020. And do you know what? That's obviously a way to go about it. However, the flip side of that is museums and their relationships with private investors has created liabilities and points of pressure, shall we say. For example, the amount of names that are having to be removed from various halls and rooms and lecture theatres in institutions across the world because that family is tied to all sorts of nefarious dealing. So there's a conversation about this, and I think it's a double-edged sword either way they go. More funding from the taxpayer and the British government means yet more input, oversight and control from the British government, who in its current iteration are being overweening, in my opinion, or funding from private investors looking for a tax break and possibly looking to heritage wash some of their more nefarious earnings. So I don't know. Brian, if they put the toilets on their virtual museum, I think that would be an odd choice. Yeah, the British Museum is, I don't know what they expected. I mean, it's an old museum, but at the same time, people have always needed to pee. I don't know what they thought was going to happen. It's very hard to find a lav in the British Museum. Very hard to find a lav. It's a good point. So we will see how this goes. And as and when we get more news on it, I will, of course, update you. We have got $19 million worth of looted antiquities returned by the Manhattan DA's office to Italy in a repatriation ceremony. Now, I'm not sure how many of these repatriations were made possible because of that scholar's work that we talked about last time, that he feels he's not getting proper credit. And is this going to further that sense of disillusionment in him? What we have is a repatriation ceremony took place at the Italian consulate in New York on the 10th of October. Included in it was a 6th century Corinthian bronze helmet, a 1st century gilded bronze plaque depicting a Dionysian religious ceremony, and an Apulian plate showing the god Eros from around 350 BCE. And for those of you who did talking about BCE and CE, today I have been working on the history glossary that I mentioned in a community tab post, and we are going to be talking about the difference between AD, BC, and BCE and CE, among a myriad of other things. In fact, I got so many great suggestions that some of them are going to have to be separate topic-specific history glossaries. We are going to do a topic-specific history glossary on things like food, the royal court, and illness-related stuff for now. So there's going to be some cool stuff to talk about, and I think because this video was already longer, the script for it is already longer than I had expected. So I'm going to try and keep it nice and tight so that we don't spend the best part of an hour talking about it, because I know we want to keep things snappy. But that will be coming out hopefully this week, maybe next week. We will see how I can get it done. This is some of these seized objects are unsurprisingly at the centre of multiple ongoing looted antiquities dealers, one of them being Robin Symes. We've heard that name before. A number of these antiquities have been seized from Symes, including 266 objects that have been recently returned to Italy. This article points out, quote, this is the latest in a number of notable returns of antiquities since the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, took his post on 2 years ago. Since then, the office has returned more than 275 items to Italy and more than 1,000 objects to 27 countries. This effort has been accomplished with the help of US Homeland Security investigations, but also, let's remember, by academics. In one academic in particular, his embargoed thesis that he can't publish, he can't make a name for himself. They certainly do, Aurora. They do look like piano keys. Now you mention it, I hadn't spotted that before. I see. When I first saw them, I thought they had like a fringe, like one of those old lampshades with a fringe on it. But so yes, we shall see what goes on with the District Attorney's Office and also with how they pursue their attribution of things. This I thought was interesting. They have done analysis on the Parthenon marbles, and in doing so, they think they have found out just how intricate the painting would have been on these sculptures. So they have got, we're told, remarkable details from the statue of Dion, who is shown reclining on fabric draped rocks with her daughter Aphrodite. They examined the distribution of Egyptian blue in the pattern of her gown. They found the image of a pair of human legs running, along with other images which they believe may show a hand and a foot, part of, quote, a woven figurative design with human figures appearing and disappearing between the folds of the garment. I mean, that to me just makes, for me, the reference point is the Elizabeth rainbow portrait with the eyes and ears and maybe noses all over it, or possibly some other hole-based orifice, who can tell? Maybe mouths, depending on how vulgar you're feeling. Could be something else, another set of lips. But we have got to me, that kind of that sort of humanized forms or bits of people on a garment, that really reminds me of that. They also found the pattern of a palmlet, which is apparently a stylized palm leaf, which was a common motif of the period. It was assumed, we're told, that these Parthenon figures had been painted wearing more subdued garments, perhaps to show the intricacy of the carving. But yes, Liz, I started saying it and I thought, better walk this back fairly quickly. We aren't on History After Dark now, friends. So I don't know why they assumed it would be subdued, because the majority of historical sculptures and wall paintings and design, the status quo almost is really vibrant color. So I suppose I'm surprised that the assumption was subdued color, because when I think about painting marble statues, I always assume they're going to be almost obnoxiously vibrant. But we're told the polychromy, I'm not sure how to pronounce that word. Because I would say polychromatic, but when it's polychromy, is it polychromy? May have been just as elaborate. Quote, the technical intricacy of merging such a complex figurative decorative element into already extremely complex draperies in which figures appear and disappear within the folds was somewhat unexpected. So I suppose maybe it's not the colour, but it's the technical difficulty. They have examined the way the statues were carved, discovering that the sculptors use subtly different techniques to represent different fabrics of the Olympian gods and goddesses' gowns. There was crisp tooling for linen and smoother work for wool, while skin is highly polished. That's really fascinating that they've made it textural in that way. And we're told, despite the remarkable new paint patterns that have been revealed, a detailed understanding of how the artists used it remains tantalizingly out of reach. Quote, that makes it, I believe, almost impossible to give a sense of what they really would have looked like, because we don't know enough. Knowing the pigments is just not enough. This research was published in the journal Antiquity. So if you have access to that, you can check it out. For those who were interested in the queen that is commemorated on that Viking runestone, where we now know so much more about it because it's been translated, we talked about it last time. This is a long article and it's got I couldn't pick out the most interesting points because there are so many of them. So it's linked. If you want to know more about her, go and check it out because the article is fabulous. So I didn't want to put any bits and pieces up because I think you should go and read the whole thing. So that is, in fact, read all of the articles, but this one is one to chuck on your tablet or laptop for your train ride. And we talked about this, that Cleveland Museum that was going to have this statue of Marcus Aurelius seized. They have now So my husband just pointed out, we're going back to the British Museum about how they're going to employ people. He's just said something that is so true, but yet so upsetting. He says, don't be so cynical. Think of all those short-term, precarious, exploitative contracts for early career academics as freshly minted PhDs are used to wash cheap and abysmal planning and execution. Yeah, of course, that's what they'll do, isn't it? They'll promise the earth to some early career researcher to do all of the digitization. Of course they will. So this we have. The Cleveland Museum of Art has sued New York City authorities over their seizure of this headless bronze statue. A warrant was signed by a judge in Manhattan on the 14th of August that ordered the seizure of the statue. The museum argues in its suit the statue was lawfully obtained and that Alvin Bragg's office has no legal authority seize it. This warrant was secured as part of an ongoing investigation into a smuggling network that involved antiquities that were looted from Bourbon in southwestern Turkey, trafficked through Manhattan, which is why Bragg and his team can get involved. This is a 1.9 meter statue that dates from AD 180 to 200, and it's supposed to be worth $20 million. Oh, yes, it will definitely be less than minimum wage, like all early career researchers' salaries when you work out it looks great. The salary always looks great when they pay you per hour and they give you your lecturing hours. But what it doesn't take into account is the load of marking that you'll get and then the extra marking you'll get because a senior scholar doesn't want to do it. So, yes, when it comes to Antiquities Journal, absolutely. In the US and also in the UK, public universities, but also libraries and archives in-house do have access to these journals. So if you haven't got access away from the institution, then if you get a reader's card, it will almost certainly, so the British Library will have access to these journals. Yeah, I mean, my husband knows because he lived through it with me. So he yeah. I think he's claiming jurisdiction because the trafficking happened through Manhattan. Could be tenuous. To be honest, I live in a nation that isn't federal, so I'll be honest with you. I don't know. I don't really know how jurisdictions work. I mean, while we do have different police forces, it's all, broadly speaking, one legal system. So, a spokesman for Bragg said the office is reviewing the lawsuit and, quote, will respond in court will respond in court papers. My husband says that he wants me to tell Collectortus that he hopes he's wrong and that he's sorry. You're not wrong, babe. You're not wrong. It's almost certainly what's going to happen. They will have to get this done in 5 years. The British Museum will have to cut corners somehow, and it's going to have to be wages, surely. And unless they get an enormous influx of cash from somewhere, we'll see. We'll see. This statue was removed from view earlier in the year, and the museum changed the description of the piece on its website, where they called it, rather than calling it a draped male figure, they indicated a connection to Marcus Aurelius. The Manhattan DA's office has worked in recent years to repatriate hundreds of objects looted from countries including Turkey, Greece, Israel, and Italy, and it's unclear who might be targeted in the investigation of this Cleveland seizure. The sea statue does show a man in flowing robes, and he holds one hand in front of him in a regal pose. We will see how this all shakes out in terms of what the courts are going to find and what the upshot's going to be. We have this is the ongoing conversation about human remains on display and what that's going to mean. My understanding is that the Mutter Museum, this is in many ways I don't want to say stock in trade, but I know they have a lot of bits and pieces of people, not to put too fine a point on it, on display. And a community meeting was held. About 60 people are said to have gathered to share their experiences and air their grievances about the recent changes in direction. Because a new administration earlier in the year removed the Medical History Museum's online exhibit and also popular educational videos in the name of an ethic review. So to get access to a journal, if you get a reader's card for somewhere like the British Library or one of the other big archives, or if you can get a reader's pass for most universities, double check which journals they have access to. It should be loads of things are going to be available through something called JSTOR. I get my journal access through the London Library, but that is a paid subscription service. But that means that I can access journals remotely from home, which is ideal when I've got a child. Before I had a child, I would go to the British Library and sit on their computers and access it. But sometimes you can only research at like 3 a.m. when you've got a small child, and those libraries aren't open then. But yes, so lots of library cards will have it, but it's worth checking when you sign up. So we have got, these have all been removed in the name of ethical review. Some, but not all, have now been restored. There are now debates over how a medical history museum should handle human remains from the past, some of which do not come from consenting patients. At this community meeting, several people talked about how much it meant to them that the museum showed human remains of people who had disability and conditions like their own. We have an account from Karen Andrade, who said it was emotional for her when she came to the museum for the first time and saw a specimen of a patient with the same congenital condition that she has, a condition that means that she will eventually not be able to walk because it will fuse her spine. She said, quote, "I've seen plastic models in doctor's office over the years, but I never knew what was actually going to happen at the end of the day, years down the line. I was in tears of happiness," she said afterwards. "It made me feel so much closer to all of the other displays here and the people that experienced them and went through all of the trials and tribulations of being a human being." A biomedical engineer, Rachel Lance, flew from North Carolina to Philadelphia for this meeting. She said that last year she had surgery to remove an unusually large uterine fibroid. She donated it to the museum because of how much the museum meant to her. She said that the first trip to the museum resulted in tears of joy and catharsis because at the visit she saw bodies like hers. She saw samples of people being represented, and furthermore, I saw attention and sensitivity being paid to the way those samples were discussed in formats that provided medical information that was accessible by the public. She said she attended the meeting on Tuesday because since the new administration took charge, she and a friend who donated a heart have not been able to get in touch with museum personnel. She said, quote, "So please tell me where else can disabled people like me go and provide permission to others to ask questions in an environment where they feel comfortable, where I've given permission to be looked at and to be examined and provide information back, as opposed to the alternative for most disabled people, which is for it to be done to us unwillingly without our consent on the street." So Lydia Wood, who worked as an archivist, stood up and thanked Lance for her story, but she did point out that there are specimens in the collection that did not come from patients who consented, as Lance did. Quote, "We can do better. There are things about this museum and this collection that are still causing harm and hurting people today. And the thousands of people in this collection deserve rest and deserve to also control their own stories in the way that they were not able to. Wood said it is possible for medical museums to research the provenance of their collections more fully and to find descendants of patients to figure out what should happen next. I don't know. My overriding feeling is that human remains should not be on public display in a museum. That is my belief. But I'm equally happy for people to disagree with that. I am sensitive to the value that a person may feel in encountering a specimen that connects them to that collection, that they feel that they themselves are represented. I do think that for every individual who finds peace in that, there will be a number of others who won't, who will see in the medicalization of and the continued medicalization of another human being who even in death cannot get peace because they are on display, I can see how other people with similar conditions might find it painful and, in fact, the diametric opposite of restful. So I don't know what the answer is. I think that ongoing conversations are the way forward. I think that the wrong thing would be to act swiftly and decisively and make irreversible choices in either direction. So the door needs to be left open, conversations need to be happening, and sensitivity, compassion, and kindness is the thing that I think needs to prevail, even when the conversations get heated. I can definitely see from both sides why the arguments are strong. Yeah, I mean, I think if you donate your body to science, then I think it needs to be specifically donated for display. And maybe there should be a time limit. So, you know, my human remains can be on display for 50 years or 100 years. And then, but then we're in sort of living will territory. And that's one thing. But this is not what's happened with lots of these remains. And, you know, without permission, without consent, I think if they are different circumstances. And I can also see how this is the case, that there is an element to which these are, in just seeing the medical condition and perhaps with the best in the world, people talking the account. I mean, I don't know how they're laid out, the account talking about their successes or anything like that, that the thriving in spite of, I can also see how that's incredibly frustrating all around. Meanwhile, the American Museum of Natural History in New York is going to remove all of its human remains from display. It's a reform predicated on revised thinking about collection practices that it now says were, quote, deeply flawed. They plan to overhaul its collection of about 12,000 human remains, including skeletons of grave-robbed Indigenous and enslaved people, as well as the bodies of New Yorkers that were collected as recently as the 1940s. So that's grave robbing into the 20th century. The museum president says, quote, human remains collections were made possible by extreme imbalances of power. Many researchers in the 19th and 20th century used such collections to advance deeply flawed scientific agendas rooted in white supremacy, namely the identification of physical differences that could reinforce models of racial hierarchy. This is part of a wider move. Numerous medical and anthropological institutions are facing similar issues. I think collegiality and maybe what becomes a North American conversation then expands out into a global heritage conversation about the way in which human remains are dealt with and treated in museum settings. So maybe this is the answer as well. It's not just conversations with local communities. It's a kind of more those need to happen, but also perhaps larger scale conversations need to be going on too. we have a reference to the 30-year-old Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, which obliges institutions to return indigenous remains. But there are, of course, problems with identification, which slows down the process. And we are told that the Natural History Museum has repatriated about 1,000 Native American remains, but it does hold 2,200 more. And it's unclear where these should be returned to. And these further studies have apparently angered critics. We are told that some collections are put together to prove or disprove now discredited scientific theory, including things like eugenics. Many of these collected remains belong to individuals who did not consent, and the work that was done on them was dehumanizing and also served to impact and create further suffering on living people for decades and centuries ongoing. We are told that the museum currently has 12 display cases for human remains, which range from skeletons including that of a Mongol warrior from AD 1000, which is in a reconstructed display, to various ceremonial and practical items made using human bones, including a 19th century Tibetan apron. The museum's director said in a letter that none of the objects are so essential to the goals and narratives of the exhibition as to counterbalance the ethical dilemmas presented by the fact that human remains are in some instances exhibited alongside and on the same plane as objects. And that's it. That's the thing. None of the objects are so essential to the goals and narratives of the exhibition as to counterbalance the ethical dilemmas by the fact that human remains are in some instances exhibited alongside and on the same plane as objects. Yeah, I mean, I think ossuaries are a really interesting counterpoint to my assertion, because an ossuary is, by its very definition, human remains effectively turned into decoration to ornament a building. But it's occurring in a spiritual sanctified space, in a place where people are at rest according to their cultural funerary practices of note and of choice. So I don't know. I assume that is different. I think it, considering how I have seen people behave in heritage sites, I do think that it would need to be heavily policed, because since the world's opened back up, there are people that have started to behave in ways in heritage settings that are unusual, shall we say. Unusual. I've been to that ossuary near Prague. I've been in that ossuary in Prague, and it is utterly breathtaking and fascinating. But also, it's very hard to actually see those as the remains of real people, because they are shaped into chandeliers, for example. I did not know that. 3 skeletons and part of an ancient Roman road under 3 skeletons and part of an ancient road under the floor. Well, I suppose that's the thing. What do you then do when you've got an excavation that's found human remains, and then the decision has been made to put a bit of glass in the floor The remains are where they were buried, but you're still exhibiting the remains. These are all this is why there needs to be ongoing conversation, because I don't think with anything there's a hard and fast rule. But the conversation needs to happen. Is what, and I have my viewpoints, but I'm also happy to engage in the conversation. For an excellent article, and indeed an excellent creator, this is another one that I'm not going to share sections from because I think it's very worth reading in its entirety. I follow Erin Thompson on Twitter for while I'm now on Twitter, and Erin's Twitter profile is fabulous. Erin's work is fabulous, and I recommend checking out this article. A New York museum's House of Bones. The American Museum of Natural History holds 12,000 bodies, but they don't want you to know whose. So do check out the article. I think it's very, very worth having a look at. Susan, I don't think it's the same as a human skin lampshade. The ossuaries are on church grounds. These are, I don't even pretend to know what the cultural practice is, but there are ossuaries all over Europe where there is a connection between honoring the divine, honoring God through the creation of these items. There is a sense, and I believe an argument, that the humans whose remains have been put into making these are willing, able, and overjoyed that they might be a part of it, this kind of decoration. In the same way that for some people, the thought of being burned on an open pyre in the middle of the street is a horrifying desecration of remains. For other people, it is fully in line with their funerary practice and actually a mark of honor and respect. There are certain things that, because of your cultural heritage, your socialization, that those things would be completely unacceptable. There are communities that unbury their dead and take them out and give them food and celebrate with them and dress them up. Is it something that I want to happen to my remains? No. But when we have these discussions, what we absolutely cannot do is come at it from a homogenous cultural standpoint. When we have these conversations, that's why it's so vital that it includes the people of the communities where these remains come from, because when it comes to deciding what should happen with these remains, it requires cultural input that is sensitive to the origin culture that those human remains reside in and belong to. So those are my feelings. So this we have moved here from an update to a repatriation in this article, and now we are moving on with repatriations. This is, I've talked about ProPublica so many times and how wonderful I think the writing is and the work is. And this is a no exception here. A prominent museum obtained items from a massacre of Native Americans in 1895. The survivors' descendants want them back. This is the aftermath of the killing of Wounded Knees, which I studied when I was doing at school. I studied the Battle of Wounded Knee as part of my pre-GCSE, I want to say. this is the 1990 law was supposed to, quote, expeditiously return such items, but descendants are still waiting. And do check out this full article and see what you think of it. I thought it was brilliantly written. I thought it was brilliantly researched, and I think it's very, very compelling. I love Caitlyn's channel. I, in fact, have her book, Here to Eternity. I think her channel is fabulous. I think she and I probably would potentially disagree on certain things, but of course I can see from her point of view that the display of human remains and the engagement with human remains is about destigmatizing death in a way that is actually empowering for the living. And I very, very much get that. I would, in some ways, love to have a conversation with her about it and, yeah, see what she thinks. See if we can, maybe we can come to a consensus and conclusion. Yeah, Wounded Knee was a massacre. It was not a battle, but it's the book, I believe, is entitled Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, was one of the books that I read, and it was sold to me by my teacher as a battle. I now, of course, recognise that that's not the case. A 300-year-old painting that was stolen by an American soldier during World War II has been returned to a German museum, we learnt. This is an 18th century painting titled Landscape of Italian Character. This is by the Vienna-born artist Johann Franz Nepomuk Lauterer. It's been missing for 80 years. And this was handed over by the FBI earlier this month. And Art Recovery International, who is a company that is focused on locating and recovering stolen and looted art, tracked down the elusive painting after a person in Chicago reached out last year claiming to possess a stolen or looted painting that their uncle brought back after serving in World War II. The painting has been missing since 1945. It was first reported stolen from the Bavarian State Painting Collection in Munich, Germany, and it was added to the database of German Lost Art, the German Lost Art Foundation, in 2012. Oh, let's just jump. That's annoying. So the founder of Art Recovery International said, quote, the crux of our works at Art Recovery International is the research and restitution of artworks looted by the Nazis and discovered in public or private collections. On occasion, we come across cases such as this, where Allied soldiers might have taken home objects as souvenirs or trophies of wars. Being on the winning side doesn't make it right. I explained our policy of not paying for stolen artwork and that the request was inappropriate. We also know that someone tried to sell the painting in the Chicago art market in 2011 and then disappeared when the museum put forth their claim. So it does seem like there has been the person trying to flog it had a rough idea. The painting is due to be displayed for the first time since World War II in Munich very soon. And apparently the Bavarian State Collections first started to search for the painting between 1965 and 1973, but they had no idea where this painting could possibly be until decades later. The person who went to Munich, from Munich to Chicago to retrieve the painting, is going to bubble wrap it and then take it back home. Ebert, who is the person going to pick it up, said that luckily it will fit in his suitcase. Maybe not. Maybe don't advertise that's what you're planning on doing, babe. I mean, I'm not not going to lie to you, I have to say that it doesn't leap out at me as, my goodness, what a stunner. But it's also possible that Steve has it right and that what it actually needs is just a really good clean. This is a big thing about artwork, whether looted or otherwise, in private collections. I bang on about this all the time. Artwork, artifacts, books. In a private collection, the individual or individuals holding those pieces are under no obligation, zero obligation, to preserve, conserve, or protect that work for the nation, the world. No obligation. They could, if they so choose, take this painting. They could buy a Picasso and they could cut it to ribbons. They could make it into a jigsaw puzzle. They could spill soup on it. They could do whatever they like. There will be no blowback on them for doing so. So that's one of the things that I think about when things go into private collections, is that there's no oversight about how those things should be protected or cared for. Lots of people saying it needs a good clean. Maybe that's the plan when it gets back to Munich. After the discovery of native remains last spring, an anthropology department at Hood Museum is making progress on accountability. The anthropology department and the Hood Museum of Art have taken steps towards addressing the presence of unethically obtained human remains at Dartmouth. This is since the discovery in late March. The college announced the discovery of skeletal remains of 15 Native American individuals in the Hood Museum's collection, and after examining the anthropology department's osteology collection. Following this discovery, the college held a cleansing ceremony in several buildings, which we did talk about. So maybe this should be an update / repatriation. And a Navajo medicine man came to do the cleansing of the building. According to the Hood Museum curator of Indigenous art, they had launched the, quote, working group on human remains at Dartmouth. This group's mission is to identify human remains within the collections and then create a framework on future procedures regarding the use of human remains in teaching and research at the college. To realise their goals, the anthropology department have hired external auditors with expertise in forensic anthropology to review the college's osteology collection. And they've also hired anthropological geneticist Raquel Fleskis to ensure that future work with human remains meets ethical guideline. They are also in the process of hiring an archaeologist specialising in Indigenous America, who will likely have an affiliative appointment with the Native American and Indigenous Studies programme, emphasising that it's going to help to bridge both departments. So what it sounds like is they are putting their money where their mouth is, hiring the people who can make this right as far as is possible. We have some more repatriations. Spanish police claim to have confiscated ancient gold jewellery worth millions that was taken from Ukraine. They have confiscated 11 pieces of ancient gold jewellery, which was illegally taken out of Ukraine in 2016. 5 people were attempting to sell the pieces in Spain, and they have been arrested in recent weeks. This includes 2 Ukrainians, one of them an Orthodox church priest, and 3 Spaniards. It sounds like a very, very weird version of the Italian job. I don't know why I said that. It's an odd heist, I think. So this jewellery was said to be worth 60 million euros, dating between the 8th and 4th centuries BCE. I could hear my husband laughing. I think maybe I've misrepresented the Italian job. I feel I have. I don't know a lot about film. I'll be honest with you. An ornate gold belt was seized in 2021, and the rest of the pieces were seized in recent weeks. The piece are now being studied by Spain's National Archaeological Museum and the country's Cultural Heritage Institute. And interior ministry attaches in Albania, Bulgaria, Cyprus, North Macedonia, and Ukraine have helped with the investigation. That's what I meant. A Ukrainian, a priest, and 3 Spaniards walk into a museum and they come out with 60 million euros worth of gold. So it's a good day out, I suppose, until you're arrested. I mean, the first time the English crown jewels were pinched, it was by the monks at Westminster. So this does not surprise me. This the fact that it wasn't in fact a gold heist is luck more than judgment. I'm pleased it is because I didn't know that 100%. So thank you for confirming. Thank you. More repatriation here. We have got, this is our last piece of repatriation, by the way. An 11th century monastery reclaiming artifacts from the US, and while doing so, it discovered a hoard of treasure in the process. Oh, apparently, Benny Hill's character in the Italian Job was a professor, which is apparently, according to my husband, priest adjacent. I don't think he knows what academia is. He was a professor. That's priest adjacent. Okay. We're going to have a chat about why that would be. The peanut gallery is downstairs giggling. I can hear him. I can hear his little chortles and he's typing. I don't know what that means. Hidden under years of dirt and grime in intellect among criminals. I see. Oh, so clever priest, clever professor doing crimes. Okay. Hidden under years of dirt and grime in storage rooms, hundreds of precious religious objects have been rediscovered at a monastery in Nepal's capital, Kathmandu. They found crowns worn by Buddhist priests, and I recommend checking out this article because I didn't have space for it here, but this article has got all of the pictures. And there are some beautiful artifacts that have been photographed. The story of this object rediscovery stretches beyond the warren of shrines, courtyards, and ornately decorated columns that have stood on this site since the 11th century. Until at the start of this year, 2 of the sculptures were 7,500 miles away at the Rubin Museum of Art in New York. And this is one of Nepal's religious sites. It's no stranger to theft and looting. Nepalese authorities estimate that up to 80% of the country's religious artifacts have been stolen or sold on the black market since the 1980s. And as museums begin to digitize their collections, like the British Museum's doing, and make them publicly available online, more claims are being made around the world for pillaged objects to be returned. Now, I'm just going to say something. I was giving BOD, benefit of doubt, to lots of these museums, saying it's a very expensive process to digitize the full collection. We are talking millions and millions of objects. It's a hard time, so of course they're not all digitized. But now, when these things, when it puts it like that, as museums digitize their collections and make them publicly available online, more claims are being made around the world for pillaged objects to be returned. So not only is it an expensive and time-consuming process, it also means that people can see the stuff you've pinched that you shouldn't have, and it makes it awkward. Amid growing calls for West Museums to repatriate stolen cultural heritage, the Met did announce in 2022 that it was returning a 13th century wooden temple carving to this particular shrine, this particular place of worship. It's just jumped. In Itambaha. The Rubin repatriated 2 Nepalese wooden carvings, one originating from this monastery and the other from a nearby temple complex that is thought to have been looted too. The leaders of this religious space have pointed out that the recovering these objects is not just about historical injustice. It's also sparked a dialogue that's brought to fruition a long-time dream, namely the creation of a new museum in the grounds of the monastery to research and catalogue its more than 500 objects. That museum opened in late July, and it currently displays some 150 of the works, which spans 6 centuries, and it tells the history of antiquities looting in Nepal. The rest of the objects remain in storage, at least they do for now. And what I will say is that this becomes then a draw for people to go and check out this, what looks like fabulously laid out exhibition. The greater the draw from all sorts of people of that tourist footfall that is bringing tourism money to these locations, and they deserve a share of that. They are their objects. They deserve a share of that tourism revenue. So we are now hopping on to the new news, friends. Skeletons discovered in a 5,000-year-old tomb in Orkney. These have been described as incredibly rare. And the ruins of this tomb are incredibly rare. This Neolithic site was, we are told, largely destroyed by Victorian antiquarians 127 years ago. The Victorians have got a lot to answer for, generally. However, despite all this damage, we are told they have found 14 skeletons of men, women, and children. Archaeologists have pointed out these remains have been carefully laid out, and that DNA and isotope analysis is going to show if they are related to each other and where they might have been from. They've also found individual pieces of human bones as well. Dr. Anderson Wymark said that 5,000 years ago, the tomb would have been a prominent feature on the landscape and likely to have looked similar to Orkney's Macho chambered cairn, which is the picture you can see of the mound with the rainbow over the top. Professor Cummings said, quote, "The preservation of so many human remains in one part of the monument is amazing, especially since the stone has been mostly robbed for building material. It's incredibly rare to find these tomb deposits, even in well-preserved chambered tombs. And these remains will enable new insights into all aspects of these people's lives." Anne Muir, who owns the land where this particular tomb was found, is said to be very excited by the discovery. She said, quote, "If it can help Hugo and his team learn more about how people lived in Orkney, that is definitely a bonus. It's quite remarkable to have it on your land." How cool is that? Ancient rock carvings revealed by receding Amazon waters amid drought. So, following on, I think, from the Viking arrow that was found in the permafrost, we're yet again having climate change doing the work of archaeologists. So the finds are great. The reason that they've been found is less good, I'm going to say. As we can see, we've got human face and other figures etched into stone, and they were etched about 2,000 years ago. These have been found on Amazonian riverbanks. They are kind of, in some ways, a little bit haunting. Like the face we can see in that picture, I do find a little bit, I find it quite haunting, but incredible. These petroglyphs, which includes animals and other forms, have been revealed on the shores of the Rio Negro, which is at an archaeological site known as the Ponto de Leches, or the Place of Slabs. The Place of Slabs. Researchers estimate, I think the Spanish version is prettier, but they estimate the markings to be between 1,000 and 2,000 years old. The last time these carvings were sighted was during a severe drought in 2010, but they have re-emerged this month with more markings appearing as the waters recede further. Big yikes. Amid an unusually dry season, which scientists are attributing to the El Nino weather pattern and warming in the North Atlantic, linked to the climate crisis, the Rio Negro has dropped below 13 meters for the first time in recorded history. Carlos Augusto da Silva of the Federal University of Amazonas identified 25 groups of carvings on a single rock, which it's believed was used as a whetstone to sharpen various instruments. This is an area, we're told, for the preparation of tools. It's also said that fragments of ceramic thought to be thousands of years old have been found at the site, which was home to large indigenous villages in pre-Columbian times. Quote, these locations, today archaeological sites with black soil, large quantities of ceramic fragments and rock carvings, tell the region's ancient indigenous history and must be treated with respect by all of us who live in Manaus today. So it's weird because in a way I'm like, I hope we don't find any more because it means the river's going to drop further. But if we do, I'll update you. A 2,700-year-old statue that was hidden for protection in the 90s has been rediscovered. More than 2,700 years ago, the Assyrian king Sargon II ordered the construction of his own city in what is now Iraq. Known as Dur Sharukin, or modern-day Khorsabad, the sprawling city was meticulously planned and fortified with outer walls broken up with 7 gates. Some of these gates were adorned with massive winged statues. And one such statue is the one excavated by archaeologists in 1992. In 1995, its head was stolen. And so to prevent further damage, officials reburied the figure until now, because a team of archaeologists have uncovered the Lamasau again, and they've brought it out of its underground hiding place for the first time in nearly 30 years. Lamasau served to display ancient king's power, often part of city gates, placed outside other important sites. All of this is coming from the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is a great resource, but it does point to this person, the author of this, not actually communicating with the archaeologist. I'm not quite sure of why. Maybe a further update will let us know. The statues depicted the head of a human with a beard on the body of a bull or a lion with wings. These monuments were carved by artisans. They could weigh as much as 40 tons. And we are told that Khorsabad is in northern Iraq. It's about 290 miles north of Baghdad. So as and when we find out more about that, hopefully from the archaeologist in question, I will, of course, update you. Look at these. Bronze Age treasure hoard found. Look at that necklace. Isn't it fabulous? This has been found in Switzerland. It was made by a metal detectorist. So once again, we haven't got a picture of a cute kid being excited this time, but still a metal detectorist who, among realizing what they got, notified local authorities. So, yes, the archaeologists then conducted a block recovery at the site. They removed 50 by 50 by 50 centimeters of earth. This block was then transported to a laboratory where bronze discs, spiral rings, and over 100 amber beads that date from around 1500 BC were recovered. This block contained 14 bronze discs, each decorated with 3 circular ribs and a round spike in the middle. On the inside is a narrow grommet from which a thread or leather strap could be pulled through. It's been determined that these discs are likely part of a higher status jewellery piece, which had spirals hung between the discs as spacers. 11 such spacer spirals, wow, say that 3 times fast. 11 such spacer spirals were found in the block, as well as 8 larger spirals made from fine gold wire. They found 100 amber beads the size of pinheads that were removed from the block with tweezers. They found 2 finger rings, a bronze arrowhead, and a beaver tooth, a perforated bear tooth, a rock crystal, a fossilized shark tooth, a small ammonite, and several lumps of polished ore. A study of the area where the block recovery took place has yielded no evidence for burial, suggesting that the treasure hoard was deposited intentionally, either for security or at a time of conflict. So what's interesting is that there are very few Bronze Age settlements known in this area, except for a large Bronze Age dwelling village, but that site dates from 1000 BC. So 500 years after these finds have been dated to. The objects, which we are told some of which are very sensitive, are being restored, and the plan is to exhibit them in the Museum of Archaeology in Frauenfeld in 2024. So if anybody's going to get a chance to go and see that, do let us know what you think. This is whenever I see stuff like this, and I think it's so fabulous, but imagine when it was brand new and it was presumably sat around someone's neck. Imagine. I mean, you'd just know they were important, wouldn't you? And then with like the matching finger rings. Purple, Purple Conundrum, you haven't got to say sorry. We love you. We love you. You pun away. You have a nice time punning in the comments. Onwards, a new king added to Britain's history books. I'd never heard of this one. This is a coin found in Hampshire that has fetched more than £20,000 at auction. It dates to around 50 BC and apparently is smaller than a human fingernail, which I suppose depends very greatly on how big your fingers are. Like a coin the size of my thumbnail, small. A coin the size of my fingernail, little fingernail, that's problematic. So define it. It's stamped with the name Esonertos. Esonertos. I'm not sure if that's how it's pronounced. It's a new king. I don't know how it's pronounced. The coin is inscribed with Esonertos' name, a previously unknown Iron Age ruler. This find was made by the detectorist Lewis Fudge, and it's been described as by experts as, quote, one of the outstanding discoveries in recent decades. This coin bears the name, and we are told it dates to the very beginning of written language appearing in the British Isles. It was expected to fetch around £4,000, but frenzied bidding at auctioneer Spink saw the price raised to £20,400. So that's a lot. This coin was struck sometime between 50 and 30 BC, which is shortly after the raid on Britain by Julius Caesar. The Roman landing in Britain isn't going to be for about another 100 years, about 46 AD. So it's still a little while to wait. So this is from the raiding time. Leading Iron Age experts have since studied the coin and deduced it to be struck by a preeminent male figure dubbed Incinertos, whose name translates as the mighty god Essos. It's theorized that he might have ruled as king from nearby Danbury Hill Fort. The Celtic Coin Index at the Ashmolean Museum, which is run by Dr. John Sills, said, quote, it's one of the outstanding discoveries in recent decades in Celtic numismatics. Numismatists are coin collectors. I learned that. The Iron Age coin specialist at the auctioneers, Gregory Edmond, said, quote, this fabulous piece of prehistoric artwork completes the mental image we have when we think of Iron Age Britain. The war horse and chariot, which you can see on the coin, that's the chariot wheel there. I think it's fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. It does. I can see that. I don't know if that was intentional. I'll be honest. I don't know if it's intended to look like a sun wheel. It certainly is. There is so much that's lost or unrecorded or misremembered that it is really fabulous when you find new artifacts like this. It really does change our perspective. Talking of a changed perspective, we have got a fully frescoed chamber tomb dating back to the Republican and Imperial Roman ages. This has been found in a suburb of Naples. They found an untouched chamber of frescoes, frescoed ceilings and walls in pristine condition. The room in question has ceilings and walls frescoed with mythological scenes. Ichthyocentaurs, which are pairs of sea gods with the upper bodies of men. So sort of like mermaids, but ichthyocentaurs are what they're called. And they are holding a shield in one room. It's just jumped again, apologies. Then they have got festoons that go all around this funerary chamber with figurative representations. They've got 3-headed dogs standing out. So this is what the mausoleum has been referred to as the Tomb of Cerberus. The striking painting that's given the moniker depicts the 12th and most dangerous labor of Hercules, where he descends to Hades to capture the 3-headed monster dog Cerberus. These frescoes are intact and they maintain their brilliant colour. It's thought that the tomb dates to around 2,000 years ago. A test excavation uncovered numerous ancient burials, inhumations, and cremations dating back at least, they said 400 years, but maybe they do mean 400 years from the tomb being created. So this is from the Republican to the Imperial eras. They have, at the edge of the necropolis, found an opus incertum, which is masonry using different shapes and sizes of uncut stone. This is found to be the front wall of a chamber tomb, and like the interior, it was also in an outstanding condition. And they have got 3 painted glane, an altar with vessels for libations, and the inhumed still placed on funeral beds with rich objects. This all completes a picture of a discovery which in this area is unprecedented. They have done surface reconnaissance during the preliminary archaeological investigations prescribed by the superintendents for the metropolitan area of Naples. They have found a recognition of a dispersion of material from the historical era. And an excavation test was positioned precisely in correspondence with the area, which proved to be full of burials with different rites, so both inhumation and cremation. This excavation of the chamber tomb is still ongoing, and archaeologists are planning to look into the larger necropolis as well. So I think we're going to have further updates on this, and when we do, I will, of course, share them with you all. New research shows that the Romans were early pioneers of recycling. This is research out of the University of Liverpool's Department of Archaeology, Classics and Egyptology. They are working with the Department of Classics and Ancient History at the University of Warwick. And they have used impurities in silver coins and lead pollution in Greenland ice to show that the Romans were apparently early pioneers of recycling. By extracting silver from ores and refining it at mints, it results in lots of lead pollution. This pollution enters the atmosphere, drifts across the Atlantic, and then it leaves a pollution fingerprint, they're calling it, in Greenland ice. This research has been published in the Archaeological and Anthropological journal, Sciences Journal, and they've outlined that there was a dramatic decline in lead pollution levels in the ice during the late Roman Republic, even though coins were still being produced. So the research states that during the 1st and 2nd centuries BC, Rome's access to silver mines in Iberia and southern France was interrupted by conflict. Deliberate debasement of the denarii, which is the prominent silver coin of Rome, with copper, is often considered to show interruptions in the silver production. But despite the slight dips in the fineness of silver coins, especially around the time of the social and civil wars in the 1st century BC, this does not provide enough of an explanation for the drops in lead pollution. So in order to explain this phenomena, the researchers point to Romans recycling silver, often plundered following conflicts in Iberia and southern France, to make coins. They have analysed how much of a different element was present in the coinage, gold, given that all silver produced in antiquity contained small quantities of gold. They found that around 120 BC, clusters of coins began appearing with very low levels of gold in them. The silver used in these coins appears to have become part of the silver supply for coinage in the first half of the century BC. Then in 49 BC, a new infusion of silver with high levels of gold in it appears to enter circulation. Julius Caesar returned to Rome from his battles with the Gauls in 49 BC, and so researchers are proposing that this new silver in circulation was in fact plundered by Caesar's army. So the research paper is forming part of the Rome and Coinages of the Mediterranean 2000 BCE to 64 CE project, which is hoping to understand Roman monetary strategy as an instrument of imperialism. Dr. Jonathan Wood said, quote, "Debasing silver was one way to deal with fluctuations in the silver supply. Melting down existing silver, either yours or someone else's, was another. For the Romans, recycling coins would have been considerably less expensive than extracting new silver, a benefit for their finances as well as for the environment." So there we go. They looted potentially and then recoined the things they had looted. Really interesting. I think for as long as there have been coin, and particularly when the expectation is that the coin's face value would match its physical value in terms of precious metal, there's always been a risk of debasement. In the same way that even when that isn't the case, we still have massive inflation because people fiddle with the money. That's what they do. AI has been used to read words on ancient scrolls that was burnt by Vesuvius. The University of Kentucky has challenged computer scientists to reveal the contents of a carbonized papyrus. The belief being that it's a potential treasure trove for historians. When Vesuvius erupted, it burnt loads of scrolls to a crisp in the library of a luxury villa. It also, of course, buried the Roman town of Herculaneum in ash and pumice. This disaster, it was thought, destroyed these scrolls for good. However, researchers have recently extracted the first word from one of the texts. They've used artificial intelligence to peer inside the charred remains. They have then thrown it out and opened it to a whole bunch of computer scientists. Two of them, Luke Farrater in Nebraska and Youssef Nader in Berlin, took up the so-called Vesuvius Challenge. They then improved the search process and independently hit upon the same ancient Greek word in one of the scrolls. This word means purple. Farrater, who was the first to find the word, wins $40,000, while Nader wins $10,000. Is that the case? So the other scrolls have been destroyed in previous attempts to read them. Oy, I'm not surprised at all. The race is now on to read the surrounding text. Dr. Federica Nicoladi, who is a papyrologist, a papyrusologist, I'm guessing, at the University of Naples, said that 3 lines of the scroll, containing up to 10 letters, were now readable, with more expected to come. A recent section shows at least 4 columns of text. This word is our first dive into an unopened ancient book, evocative of royalty, wealth, and even mockery. What will the content show? Pliny the Elder explores purple in his natural history as a production process for Tyrian purple from shellfish. The Gospel of Mark describes how Jesus was mocked as he was clothed in purple robes before his crucifixion. What this particular scroll is discussing is still unknown, but I believe, she says, it will soon be revealed. An old news story starts for us with purple. It's an incredible place to be in. There's a YouTube about these scrolls. Interesting. I will see if I can find that. Thank you. As the only intact library to survive from antiquity, there is, of course, a lot of interest about these scrolls from Herculaneum. Most of the texts that have been analysed so far are written in ancient Greek, but there is thought that some might be Latin texts, and fragments have revealed letters from Philodemus's work on vices and the opposite virtues, and also details of Hellenistic dynastic history. Hellenistic dynastic history, that's another really hard set of words to say. Seals has said, quote, "For me, reading words from within the Herculaneum scrolls is like stepping onto the moon. Honestly, I knew the text was there, waiting for us to arrive, but arrival only happens at the last step. And with such a talented team working together, reading the words is that step into new territory. And we've taken it. Now it's time to explore." And so I'm sure, therefore, we are going to be getting loads more information and details on this, which I will, of course, be sharing when it arrives. There is now a possibility that the Viking Age Denmark and Sweden might have had glass in their windows. There is a suggestion they might have had them from as early as the 9th century. These glazed windows are associated with medieval churches and castles most commonly. They do have plenty of examples from Viking Age Denmark and Sweden. They have examined 61 glass fragments found at Viking Age sites. But nothing indicates that the Vikings were able to produce their own glass for windows, even though they would have been familiar with the material from Europe. So the suggestion is that the Vikings might have expropriated the window glass from monasteries and churches during the raids they partook in. But according to researchers, though, this is less likely, given that the glass was found at several different Viking sites, while the chemical signature proves that the glass panes originated from different parts of Europe and the Near East. In other words, they think that it's most likely that rather than through looting, the Vikings actually acquired this glass through trade. We are told that when it comes to the Vikings, glass windows were reserved for the upper echelons of society and for religious use, as was the case in the rest of Europe. According to Mads Dengo Jensen, there may have been glass windows in the iconic hall buildings of the Vikings. These are not the large transparent windows we have today, but probably were smaller windows, might have been composed of flat, pane glass in different shades of green and brown. The idea was not to be able to look out, but to create a colourful inflow of light into the building. So this leads researchers to ask whether or not some of this glass would have been used in pre-Christian religious sites. So as we find out more on this glass, I will, of course, let you all know what they say. They have found a medieval folding chair, and the mechanism of this is so recognizable to the things that, like, near us, we've got a fishing pond, and rather a lake, I should say, and I see the fishermen, fisherwomen down with a stool that's like this, a little kind of X-frame stool with a bit of fabric over it, sat there fishing. This is just, it's amazing to me that this design of a little kind of flat packable stool hasn't changed in this long. So this is from the 7th century AD. It was found in Germany. It was first found in 2022, having been deposited as a funerary offering in a burial from the early medieval period. This grave contained the remains of a woman who was aged between 40 and 50 years. And they also found a necklace made of small multicolored beads, 2 brooches, an almondine disc brooch, and a large millefiori bead and a whorl. They also found a man's grave containing rich decorated weapons, a lance, a shield, a spade. And according to researchers, these graves were probably related to each other. But now unveiled to the public at the Archaeology in Bavaria conference, this chair consists of 2 frames connecting with an axle pin. It's decorated with brass non-ferrous metal inlays, which you can see in this other picture, which is certainly a lot more decorative than the ones that I've seen being used to fish on. This is beautiful. There are narrow slots on the horizontal struts that were used to attach a seat, likely made from animal fur. We are told that folding chairs as grave goods are exceptionally rare. Within scholarly investigations, they suggest the deceased held a prominent position or occupied a higher social status. To date, there have been 29 instances of early medieval graves containing folding chairs throughout Europe, with merely 6 of them being crafted from iron. The head of Bavarian State Office for Monument Preservation has said, quote, "The extremely rare discovery of an early medieval iron chair in 2022 was already a sensation. But the fact that such details have been preserved after remaining in the ground for over 1400 years was a surprise. The find, which at first glance seems so modern, is an absolute rarity and of the highest cultural and historical interest because it provides insight into the grave furnishings of prominent sections of the population." And I think it's really very spectacular. We have got a Christ tattooed, which has been found on a set of remains dated to around 1300 years ago from Sudan. This tattoo, which we can see here, is the so-called Chi symbol. So that's the Greek letters Chi and Rho, meaning Christ. And also there you have Alpha and Omega. So you have Christ and also the notion of God being the Alpha and Omega on this tattoo. And it was found on the right foot of an individual who is thought to have been male. The location on the right foot, we are told, is intriguing, as Christ may have had a nail driven through this spot during his crucifixion. So is it possible that what we have is one of the wounds of Christ being marked with a tattoo referencing Christ on this individual? The tattoo, of course, does indicate the individual is Christian, but we aren't sure if they were perhaps a monk. They weren't buried in the same cemetery as the monastery's monks, but rather in a burial ground that might have been used by people from nearby communities. Radiocarbon dating indicates that this individual lived between 667 and 774. At the time, Christianity was the main faith of the region and thus was very common. It's thought this individual was between 35 and 50 when they died. The body was found in 2016, but the tattoo has only just come to light with additional post-excavation analysis and full-spectrum photography. And maybe there is a culture of monastic tattooing. I think that's very interesting. I think, of course, there are many reasons why an individual might choose or permit themselves to be tattooed. And it doesn't necessarily require them to be a member of a religious community or to have taken those kinds of vows. I mean, some of the most heavily tattooed people I know have a military background. And so perhaps that's what's happening. Individuals who have been through something, who want to mark it, who want to mark their gratitude or recovery. There are multiple reasons why people engage in the markation and scarification of their bodies that don't necessarily require being part of a religious order, is what I'm going to say. However, sticking with religion and religious orders, archaeologists have found a rare reliquary, again, not belonging to a monk or a member of a religious order, instead belonging to a knight. This is a cross-shaped reliquary that was found in Poland. It was found in a structure that was once the residence of a knight, and it dates from the 14th to the 15th century, but the residence itself was first explored in the mid-19th century. But since then, there has been a lot of agricultural activity that has ploughed through and in some cases utterly destroyed the archaeological remains that were visible above the surface. But researchers of the University of Łódź have conducted a geophysical survey, and they have, through this, revealed traces of the stronghold and its supporting buildings. And After this, they then did an archaeological investigation where they found the remains of a lower floor of the structure and a furnace that was built at the end of the 13th or 14th century. In there, they found numerous artifacts and objects. They found clay ceramic vessels, door fittings, padlocks, a key, nails, hooks, and militaria, including several crossbow heads and 3 iron stirrups. This cross-shaped reliquary is made from a copper alloy. It's in fairly poor condition, so it was sent to Rocklaw for conservation. It's thought that it was worn on the chest, and inside of it, it's believed there are quotations and perhaps relics. So relics and also quotations from Holy Scripture. This is an important part of Christian faith, but it's generally worn by Eastern Orthodox or Eastern Catholic bishops. So what it's doing in the residence of a medieval knight is a good question. Is this something that perhaps was bought by a medieval knight from a Eastern Catholic bishop? Well, hopefully, as we learn more, we will also discover more about its original owner and the path that it took. Talking of keys, this one, though, found by Cotswold Archaeology in North Somerset. They have found this lovely medieval key. This was found adjacent to the 19th century manor house. And they have, on the same site, they know there was a medieval manor on this same site that's been replaced or nearby replaced by this 19th century manor house. They found a series of walls during their excavation related to the original building, and then they also found this key, thought to be late medieval, and it was discovered in association with a post-medieval wall, which followed the same alignment as the medieval boundary for this house. These kinds of keys were produced from the Roman period to the present day, and this key is no exception. It's a copper alloy, and it's got a decorated bow or key handle in a quatrefoil or 4-leaf clover pattern. It's got 3 sub-rectangular mouldings at the junction between the stem and the bow, which form a bulbous collar. The stem is circular and hollow, and the bit which goes into the lock is sub-rectangular in shape with at least one groove or channel on the exterior end. It's thought this was for a door or perhaps a chest, and it has similar characteristics to other keys that have been found. This key is likely a less common form of medieval key, which was similar in design but much smaller, which had simple bits. And although there's a possible date for this key has been determined, the question of what this key might open does remain. They are still continuing to see if they can figure out what might have been going on. So because the larger keys are more commonly found, this makes this one somewhat less common and thus perhaps arguably more interesting. I suppose if you think rarity is a reason. We have got a medieval gold ring engraved with the phrase which translates to, "I desire to serve you." It was found fairly nearby, within about 50 meters of this Tudor silver gilt hooked tag. It was found in Essex, and it's thought that these items were probably lost around the same time. The ring is said to be very tiny, but it's thought nevertheless that it was probably first of all worn by a man. They do point out that rings were worn on all joints of the finger, so it may be that this was worn towards the tip rather than all the way down. These kinds of chivalric mottos in French are fashionable between about 14 and 1500. And it is thought that anybody who could afford a ring like this would have been among the elite people that would have known how to speak French. the tag is something that would have Morty. He just covered and said, "I desire to serve you." Thank you. I've got a bit of a bugged up nose. Do excuse me. I'm just going to mute this so you don't hear me blow my nose. One moment. And we're back. Thank you, darling. Morty, this one's in a Shakespeare mug. Isn't he good? So this tag would have clipped to a skirt and pinned an upper skirt over a lower skirt. And we're told the ring is battered, the hook tag is damaged. So it's thought that perhaps the person who lost them may have been taking them to be recycled when they were lost. So the ring they think is a male ring, and they assume, of course, this hooked garment would have been a female's object. So presumably whoever's taking it has taken something from a man and something from a woman. These finds are being held as part of a coroner's inquest at Chelmsford, but an Essex museum has said they are interested in acquiring them, presumably to put on display. Hopping forward, we have a Native American village that has been unearthed in an Oshkosh road project. This is a village that dates back centuries. The city has apparently been working to reconstruct a road at Menominee. I apologize if I've mispronounced that. Menominee Park in August. And they have removed the existing roadbed and beneath it found a historic Native American village that dates back between 900 AD and 1600 AD is preserved underneath this road. So now researchers are looking into documenting all of the cultural features that have been exposed. So this work is ongoing. They have found materials like ceramic pottery for food storage and cooking. They found stone artifacts like knives and other tools. And the plan for the site is that state agencies and tribal nations are going to look to do some kind of in-place preservation of the social features. Paige. So it is Menominee. 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 If you say that so many times, it doesn't sound like words anymore. Menominee. It's like anemone. It's one of those words that's really hard to pronounce. They are not excavating the features. They are not recovering quantities of cultural items. They're going to try to preserve it in place so that the deposits and features related to the site will be where they've always remained. For a few of the artifacts that have been found, they may remain under the control of the city of Oshkosh, but UW Milwaukee has the capacity to preserve cultural items within its archaeological repository. The city of Oshkosh is asking visitors to respect the restricted areas of the park to ensure that the archaeologists can complete their work. They have said the city is under surveillance to make sure people follow federal laws prohibiting unauthorized entry. The city doesn't have a firm timeline, we're told, on when this project will be completed, but it's expected the road will be closed through winter, and the hope is the project will be completed in the spring. So we'll see what is found and what we learn from it. A 15th century painting appears that it has within it a prehistoric stone tool. In the mid-1500s, these were described as, quote, thunderstones. They're explained as rocks falling from the clouds during a storm. In 1565, they were being classified as jokes of nature. But now it's been determined that what we might have here is an early representation of a heavily detailed stone axe. We learned that an infrared analysis of this painting has shown that Fouquet, who is the artist, took a great deal of care and detail to paint this stone. There was a preparatory sketch made first, and then the final figure was reworked. It is consistent with 300,000 to 160,000 year old stone axes that are being excavated by modern archaeologists in the region where these paintings were made. The colour variation is also consistent. This is somebody who has, rather than this being some sort of a joke, it looks like a in-depth artistic study. That Fouquet seems to take a special interest in the stone. It's something that seems to have struck his imagination and grabbed his interest. De Silva, who has been investigating this piece, said, "I love the idea of connecting a hand axe, a utilitarian object that helped hominins survive 500,000 years ago, with a medieval French painting, which is so well known that it's taught in introductory art history classes. From the Paleolithic age to the Renaissance and beyond, hand axes have been and continue to be part of human history." A study on this was published in the Cambridge Archaeological Journal of 2023, and additional interviews for this article were provided by Dartmouth College. So, very interesting. Beneath the assembly rooms at Bath, a rare Georgian cold bath has been discovered. This 18th century cold bath, which may, we are told, be the only one of its kind in an elite social meeting place known as an assembly room, has been uncovered. It had been filled with rubble and covered after bombing in World War II. But its location in Bath's assembly rooms suggests to researchers that it might have been provided for those wanting an exclusive experience. However, from the National Trust, Tatiana Leboeuf says this find is highly unusual and there are many elements of the discovery that are still a mystery. This does appear to be the only type of cold bath ever built in an assembly room. They are looking currently into records, letters, diaries to see if they can piece together what might be going on here. There are records that indicate that there was a cold bath beneath the assembly rooms. They did not know what the preservation would be. Bath is most well known for its hot spring waters, but medical professionals did also recommend cold bathing. So this is essentially, you go into like a hot bath and then you do the plunge pool thing, which I think is still very common in various kinds of spa settings today, the plunge pool or the cold shower of torment. There was a trend for installing cold baths in private houses and estates, but also seemingly in public facilities. This is thought to have been more exclusive because of its particular location. These assembly rooms were built between 1769 and 1771. The New Bath Guide of 1778 mentioned, quote, a commodious cold bath with convenient dressing rooms. If you are in Bath, well, if you were in Bath, and maybe it'll be going through into November, they were running selected behind-the-scenes tours during weekends in October, and tomorrow is the last day of October, and it's not a weekend, but maybe they'll be happening in November. If you happen to be in Bath and go on one of those tours, do let us know what you thought of it and what you saw. It will probably have to be a collection of exhibitionists. It would you go to the assembly rooms, you do a tea dance, you flirt about with your fans, and then you all get into your skivvies and you jump in a cold bath. I don't know. I mean, jumping into cold water is not my idea of a good time, but each to their own is what I will say. Each to their own. A 330-year-old coin hoard hidden in a Scottish fireplace might have been buried moments before the MacDonald clan massacre. It's thought these coins might have belonged to a clan chief who was killed in a 17th century massacre. There's a diverse collection of coins, thought that it was hidden by someone who then was unable to return and retrieve them. It's located in the Highlands of Western Scotland, and Glencoe is now a national scenic area because of its waterfalls and trails. But it's also infamous for a brutal and bloody conflict between the MacDonald clan and government forces in 1692. The MacDonalds of Glencoe were targeted for failing to pledge their allegiance to William III and Mary II, the co-rulers following the so-called Glorious Revolution. So 100 government soldiers were sent to round up and kill them. And ultimately, several dozen clan members were massacred on this occasion. Lucy Ankers, who is a student from the University of Glasgow, found this pot beneath a hearthstone slab. And she said, quote, that she wasn't expecting such an exciting find as one of her firsts. I don't think I'll ever beat the feeling of seeing the coins peeking out of the dirt in the pot. There are 36 silver and bronze coins that date from the late 1500s through to the 1680s. Most were made locally, but coins from France and the Spanish Netherlands were also present, which may be mementos of Maclean's youthful travels abroad. The coins are from no later than the 1680s. So the question is, are they buried in a rush as the massacre started first thing in the morning on the 13th of February, 1692? The project excavations director, Edward Stewart, said the work at the Maclean Summer House lets them better understand the importance of the lands and also speaks to, quote, the everyday lives of those who lived here, worked the land, minded the cattle, allowing us to tell their stories as well as the grand tales of chiefs and their retinue. While Maclean Summer House has been fully excavated, the team is now poring over the finds and environmental samples to learn more about this time in Scottish history. This find potentially gives us a rare glimpse into a single dramatic event. It's a real privilege, we're told, as archaeologists, to hold in our hands these objects that were so much a part of people's lives in the past. So we will see what more comes of that as the research continues on. Well, happy birthday, Scarlett, for the 13th of February coming up. That's also my mum's birthday. She's a 13th of February baby too. She was born on Friday the 13th, though. And I don't know if it's related, but clumsiness seems to be what happens when you're born on Friday the 13th, if she's nothing to go by. This is a cool one. They're all cool ones, but this is particularly fun. Look at this picture. A 19th century shipwreck has been found by workers, a construction crew working in Florida, in downtown St. Augustine. I think that's how you pronounce it. We probably say St. Augustine, but I think if it's American, it'll be St. Augustine. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is a 19th century shipwreck. They were working on an infrastructure project in a northeastern city. They were digging throughout downtown St. Augustine as part of a project to improve drainage. And while working on this $42 million project, they dug up this historic shipwreck. And Augustine, so they're in St. Augustine. The crew took 5 days to recover what was ultimately the remains of a 19th century fishing boat, a, quote, very humble but important little watercraft. The team used water with controlled pressure to remove the mud that was covering the vessel. And they recovered a small single-masted shallow draft sailboat that would have been used to extract fish and shellfish from coastal waterways and directly offshore. It said that the boat's bottom was approximately between 24 and 28 feet in length. They only managed to recover 19 feet of which remained of the vessel. They also found a collection of artifacts. They had the base of a kerosene lamp and 2 coconut shells that might have been used as drinking cups. They also found leather shoes thought to have belonged to a crew member and some 19th century coins that were discovered in the ship wreckage. It was encapsulated in soil and mud. There was no air contact for it to decay. It is a truly incredible find. The question is now preserving that find. They have taken careful efforts to preserve the vessel, and they are looking forward to learning more about its significance to the region. We are told that St. Augustine was founded in 1565. It's the oldest permanent European settlement in the US, and it was established decades before the English colonized Jamestown. So we'll see what. Hopefully, we're going to see more of this boat once it's fully preserved, and we can learn more about it. A painting stolen in an art heist more than 30 years ago has been returned to a Glasgow museum after it was put up for sale by an unsuspecting seller. That would be a bad day, wouldn't it? We are told that thieves deactivated an alarm system, climbed up a ladder through an upstairs window to break into the Hag's Castle Museum of Childhood in 1989. They stole a cache of artifacts, some that were on loan from the world-famous Burrell collection. And none of them have been seen until now. This painting. And the painting was found on the Art Loss Register when it was put up for auction. The Art Loss Register has about 700,000 registered items, including 65,000 that are currently missing from museums worldwide. We are told of this painting that it was gifted to the museum in 1960, and they are delighted to have it back. The Art Loss Register, we're told, worked well, and the family who were holding this stolen piece, they were willing to agree that it was morally right to return the artwork, because under the law, if it's a good faith purchaser, so somebody who bought the work in good faith without the knowledge of the theft, and this purchase happened more than 6 years ago, then apparently in the eyes of the law, they are now the owner of the artwork. I was not aware of that. The original owner will not have a claim against the person anymore because more than 6 years has passed. The original owner does still have their claim against the thief, and although they won't get their artwork back, they can claim against them for the value of the artwork. But then to do that, you've got to identify who the thief is, because the one who returned it is apparently not the one who stole it. It is hoped now that some of the other 20 or so items that were listed as stolen during this time may also be turning up. Clearly, they're making their way back to market. We are told it's very satisfying to see when your work is wrongly taken from public collection, that work then returns to the collection. It's both good the work returns to the people who want it and makes it available for the public to enjoy. But it's also really good that these systems in the art sector work effectively and actually result in a positive conclusion, because what this is clearly showing is that the Art Loss Register is doing its job. My husband says that St. Augustine is frequently referred to as the oldest city in the US by US standards, unless I'm mistaken. He says that by European standards, New Orleans would be the first city. He's going to have to explain that to me. But apparently that's his grasp of geography outstrips mine by legions. An elderly French man. I'm not quite sure why you have to know he's elderly, but this is the headline. I don't know why his age matters. But an elderly French man's rare Leonardo drawing has been granted an export license after he declined a $10.6 million offer from the Louvre. Why does his age matter? Okay. A Paris administrative court has ordered France's culture ministry to order an export certificate to allow this drawing to leave the country. This is a study for San Sebastian in a landscape. It was made on a double-sided sheet, and it depicts the martyred Saint Sebastian tied to a tree in the landscape on the front. So there's been a standoff between the owner of this work, this elderly French man, who has been identified as AB, and the ministry after he first planned to put the drawing up for auction at Tarjan in 2016. He applied for an export certificate. The owner was further identified by Le Monde as a retired doctor and octogenarian who said he had kept the tiny drawing in a box for half a century after inheriting it from his father. Countries use export licensing system to keep track of cultural goods that might be deemed as being at risk or of national importance, because as such, they should not be exported without review. So the Louvre offered him $10.6 million or 10 million euros. He declined the offer. The drawing was subsequently appraised to be worth $15.6 million by two specialists, each appointed by the ministry and the owner. The French Culture Ministry sent a letter to the owner in 2020 saying it would not seek to purchase the drawing. So the court issued its judgment on Friday. It sided with the owner, demanded that the French Culture Ministry issue the export license within 2 months, and charged the state €2,000 for the owner's litigation costs. The auction house has announced a public exhibition of the work. It had announced a public exhibition of the work in June 2017, and it heralded the drawing as, quote, an extraordinary discovery made with the assistance of old master drawing expert Patrick de Beza. So we will see what happens and where this sells for, if indeed it does sell, and what that might mean if it gets exported away from France, who it goes to, maybe another museum, maybe a private collection. So we will see. Go on, click over. There we go. In the Colombian jungle, we hear about people who are working to dig up the colonial past. Indigenous Colombians are unearthing traces in the jungle of a tragic period in history where their ancestors were violently supplanted by colonists from Spain. They are working as amateur archaeologists. They brush away dirt to reveal pottery and other artifacts left behind by ancient inhabitants. They are being watched over by an archaeologist called Alberto Sartina, who is an Italian with, quote, an Indiana Jones-like aura. I don't. Considering, is that always a compliment? Don't we have questions about his practices of appropriation sometimes? We are told that it was difficult to convince the local population to get involved at first. Many didn't want to know anything about the city that had started the tragedy of Indigenous annihilation. Fair enough. But 10 years into this project, we are told dozens now partake with gusto and pride, majoritively individuals of Indigenous and Afro descent, majoritively women. We have a quote, "I like to find things we don't even know how to make today. They made their own clay and didn't have to buy it. They were very resourceful." That's 28-year-old Karen Suarez from the Embera indigenous community. Now, I had questions about, is they're using amateur? Does that mean volunteer? And what does that mean? The amateur archaeologists at Santa Maria la Antigua del Darien do receive a payment for their efforts and can also host money from hosting tourists at their homes. We have one of the participants, Antonio Chamara, age 40, says, "We have felt good in this work. We benefit a little from the economy generated and from learning about the history of our ancestors." While Jennifer Alvarez told her job on the project was, quote, "a respite from the machismo and violence in an area that's ravaged by the Gulf Clan drug cartel. This site has been the best thing to happen to a society that relegated women to housework," she said. The site also houses a museum, which is another income generator. After dark, the horseshoe-shaped museum becomes a cinema for the children of surrounding villages in a community with very basic access to services such as health and education. We're told this project also serves as some sort of open-air university, and it's inspired 16-year-old Hector Monterosa from the nearby Daniella village to aspire to a career in archaeology like his idol Sarchina. Quote, "Here in general, it's very difficult to get an opportunity to go to university. There are very few who can go, and since my family's finances are not good, this would be a great opportunity for me to start preparing for an academic career." So I think from the way this is being reported, the Indiana Jones thing, I also don't consider that to be a compliment. And if I was an archaeologist and somebody said that I had the air of Indiana Jones, I'd be like, what am I doing wrong? It's being presented in a way that it's creating and generating a net positive. I think from the sounds of it, it's being handled really well and it's giving lots of opportunity. I hope those opportunities, we see them come further to fruition, that it's not simply a lot of promise and somebody else taking a lot of the credit because they're the ones that compile it into the academic study. I hope that there is a continuation of this collaboration and also support for people who do want to then take this further into a university setting if they so choose. Now, talking about missing items, it's not just the British Museum. The National Museums in Wales are apparently missing nearly 2,000 items. We're told that they are mostly unvaluable household items, but the missing objects recorded by the Museum of Wales do also include ancient coins, tiles, jewellery, and tools. This is what I'm going to say is, I'm not sure if he's the only one on the team. That is the way it's being presented. That is, I don't know if he's been there for the whole decade. That is an inordinate amount of power for somebody to wield over a local community. I don't know who's funding it. And what he gets out of it is help with his research and presumably the capacity for publication. And I hope that is all he gets out of it. And I hope that the additional payoff is further support and help to get people into universities who want to go. I have those questions too, Lizzie. I have those questions too. But based upon the article, my spidey sense is tingling. I have queries, but the article does not offer anything that makes me go, apart from the Indiana Jones thing, that makes me go, why did you say that? If anybody finds anything else out, please feel free to send it to me. Let me know. There are 7 museums in the Museum of Wales. They have been digitising their paper records for the past 30 years, documenting all the missing items that have been recorded across the museum's history. This project is expected to take another 20 years. So far, they've recorded 1,921 missing items. Roman ceramic tiles, jewellery dating back to the 2nd century, Mesolithic tools, rare coins, and medals. Now, missing doesn't mean stolen. They do. And the Museum of Wales, from the south, as it says here, they have got 7 sites, hundreds of thousands of artifacts. Missing doesn't mean stolen. It could mean it's been put in the wrong box on the wrong shelf, or it's been transported to the wrong museum. These could be 2,000 items where 1,500 of them are this big. We could be talking about 500 chips of tile that are that big. We could be talking about 400 coins that are the size of a fingernail that were all put into one box, and then that box has been put on the wrong shelf or been given the wrong catalogue number. This doesn't. And as the catalogue continues, it may well be that as they work their way through the 7 museums and 7 sites and all of the under the floor storage they've got, they might locate a proportion of this stuff later on. Some of it might turn up. Yeah, it is. I will say that the British Museum does have a higher percentage chance of getting a greater level of funding and money to chuck this in there. So yes, every time we do move something, it should be documented and signed off. It absolutely should be. But this is where human error comes in. And when there's a possibility for human error, it can happen. It can. It might be they've all been stolen. I don't know. And we don't know how long they've been missing for either. Aurora, my theme tune does not keep changing. It's always been greenery, and I use the exact same section of it. So I don't know what you're hearing, but I haven't changed it. Hello, welcome. We are 2 hours, 17 minutes in, and this is our new news segment. And in a minute, we're going to be talking about ding-dongs. It's about to get silly. The National Collection of Wales does, we are told, contain 5.3 million items. Now, I am not going to even pretend to know what that percentage is, but it's 2,000 is a lot of items. But when you're thinking about 5.3 million items, it's maybe a lower percentage. Doesn't make it okay. We are told that more than half of the missing items were from St Fagan's National Museum of History. This is a 100-acre site where 40 original buildings from different historical periods are reproduced. Some of these items were first reported missing in the late 1940s, and it includes fencing equipment, fish hooks, and a bunch of household crockery. They think that most of the items that are recorded as missing officially were misplaced, wrongly documented, or have lost their labels. And it does, as I said, expect most to be recovered as it works its way through the whole collection. I think my husband's just done the maths, and he says it's 0.04% of the catalogue. When you think about it that way, nearly 2,000 sounds like a lot. When you put it in as 0.04% of the collection, it's still not okay. It's still not okay. But I think they have to flag this up because of the artifacts that are missing at the British Museum, which was in fact thefts. They lost 2,000 priceless treasures. And when you compare that, maybe that also throws into a bit of relief why the British Museum losses weren't flagged early enough, because the mislabeling, misplacing, and general confusion about where items are at any given time, if you've got a collection the size of the British Museum's, maybe you don't spot something like 2,000 going missing. And when you do spot that some things aren't what they're supposed to be, you assume that they are misplaced or being conserved or something else. I don't know. We will see what comes up. However, something that I think is potentially harder to explain how it just went missing is the next one. A £3 million Rodin sculpture is missing. This is a plaster sculpture. It was bought by the Glasgow Museums from the artist himself in 1901. It was exhibited in Kelvin Grove Park in 1949. This is a 2-meter sculpture. I'm assuming 2-meter tall sculpture. And it has disappeared. The director of the Comité Rodin said the disappearance of this was, quote, regrettable, but it must be put in the context of the time, as plasterworks did not arouse much interest in the 1940s. However, the work today would be worth around £3 million. The bronze statues of the 6 bourgeois de Calais, celebrating the sacrifice of local dignitaries during a siege of the northern French crown by English armies in the 100 Years' War, was commissioned and unveiled in 1895. Numerous bronze and plaster versions of the statue do exist around the world. The Comité Rodin does believe that this statue, like others, might have suffered damage at the time of the 1949 open-air exhibition. It might have shared the same fate as another statue by the artist representing John the Baptist. My husband thinks this is brilliant because he really enjoys a bit of his favorite thing to do when he was a younger man was to go to the pub with his friends and then walk home and move things from people's gardens. So plant pots, things out of a skip, garden gnomes. He was a big fan of taking home a traffic cone. And what he would sometimes do as he walked past his friend's house would be to post whatever he could through his friend's letterbox. Now, if that was the contents of somebody's skip, he would do so. So they would wake up on Christmas morning with quite the surprise. So he thinks this is a fun time for him. That's him laughing downstairs. That's him laughing downstairs. Just dobbing you in to everybody, Jamie. Just dobbing you in. There is hopes that the remains of the unlocated piece might be found in the archives. We are told that about 1,750 other objects have disappeared from Scottish Museum, including gold coins that were linked to Queen Mary I of Scotland, who reigned in the 16th century. As it also points out, the British Museum has also acknowledged the theft of thousands of items from its reserves. So these missing items, if we hadn't had the British Museum loss and theft, would we perhaps know about these ones? I don't know. He's do you know what? We are a pair well matched. I mean, I might not have been posting the contents of a skip through my school friend's front door. That might not have been my journey in life, but I did have a tattoo at 15 and I was in nightclubs where I had no business being at that age too. So we fortunately we have both matured since then, at least partially. Our last piece of new news is this. The owner of Hever Castle has applied for planning permission. They want to make some changes. Hever Castle is unsurprisingly a listed building. I think we're not shocked by that. And so consent for both exterior and interior alterations is required. They want to remove some modern wardrobes in what is believed to be Anne Boleyn's bedroom, also known as the small chamber. Oh, babe, no, it's not a cool tattoo. It's not. Do you know what? I'm just going to say it. I have got what is in modern parlance referred to as a tramp stamp on my lower back. I was 15. It was very fashionable. I made poor choices. I had no business doing that. And it's tribal print as well. Oh yeah, it's tribal print. Oh, Scarlett, I forgot the spider story. I forgot it. This week has been so manic. I forgot the spider story. I will. Do you know what? I'll make a note and I'll put it in. Brian, I love the fact that you think I was alive in Tudor of Britain. I'm obviously very well preserved, like Hampton Court Palace. There was, if you got a ticket to the Royal Court, that would be a rager. Very many drinkies. Very many drinkies. I did forget it. I'm going to put that spider on front and centre. I'm going to put that front and centre. I've thought about having it removed, to be honest, Paige. I've been looking into it. I mean, what I will say is that I am not I don't ever wear a two-piece swimsuit. So literally no one ever sees my lower back, ever. So it's a question of, do I want to spend the better part of £2 and a bit grand to remove something that I can't see and that no one else can see, that ultimately is kind of an amusing way of saying, look, we all make bad choices. Some of them stay with you for life. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've also got a black cat tattooed on my hip as well. I don't love that either. But I got that when I was 19, and I was discussing seriously getting an ironic Playboy bunny head tattoo in that location. And fortunately, my university friend said, ironic tattoos are not the one. Don't do that. They were correct. There we go. So we have got the removal of modern wardrobes from dating to the 1970s. This is in Anne Boleyn's bedroom, also known as a small chamber. They want to return the room to its original proportion and also potentially see what they can find behind it. There is a pre-application which has got some advice given to it. They have accepted that there are some concerns or issues that are going to need to be reconsidered and addressed before a formal application is submitted, so that they can hope to get a favourable outcome in this. They also want to make some changes to the other areas of the house, including renovating this fabulous bathroom. Now, I was very privileged to be taken on a behind-the-scenes tour, and I have been in this bathroom, and it is the pinkish room, the most pink room I've ever been in my entire life. Like, it looks pink here, but somehow in real life, it feels pinker. Don't know what to tell you. The plan is they want to uninstall this pink bathroom and relocate it to another building on the estate, and thus leave the Tudor room behind and present it as a Tudor closet. So these were private spaces. They did business, they studied in them, they prayed in them. So it's a hope that this will become redesigned, and there'll be like a rope up and you will see the interior of a Tudor closet. So yeah, we'll see if that planning permission gets approved and what they do with it. It's very, very exciting. See, in a way, that's I don't feel strongly enough about my tattoos to go, they need to come off. They don't make me sad. They're sort of part of my body that I'm like, yeah, if I was doing it now, I wouldn't make the same choice. But you know, it is what it is. Yes, Brian, it is. Anne of Cleves did. OhHaHa did come into Anne of Cleves' possession, and there is some incredible paneling that they found at OhHaHa Castle that connects to Anne of Cleves, because she did make some changes to the building as well. So lots of cool stories to tell there. And now I'm going to get out my little ding dong bell. There he is, the little peeing boy. Ding dong. Let's move quickly on to ding dong. First up, we've got this guy. An 11,000-year-old statue of a man holding his ding dong. I'm not sure if I can say this on YouTube. We are told could reveal secrets about a mysterious Neolithic culture. This statue was found in southeastern Turkey, and it's believed to be on the site of the oldest Neolithic temple in the world, predating the Egyptian pyramids and Stonehenge by more than 6,000 years. We have a skeletal man with both hands placed near his ding dong, and he is sitting on top of a bench adorned with a leopard. We are told that finding statues like these is not uncommon. But for the first time here, we found the phallus. Where have they normally gone? Where have they normally gone? It's the first time we found the phallus. Who takes them? Welcome, Time Lord boy. It's happening. It's happening. We don't know exactly what the statue is meant to represent, we're told, or how it fits in with the, I don't know if it's red, with the Neolithic culture. Oh, the pink, sorry. We were talking about the bathroom, not the ding dong being red. I've realised that now. Okay, grow up. Grow up. And it's not helpful that Jamie is standing downstairs wetting himself. We don't know. We don't know what the statue is meant to represent, or how it fits in with the culture, the Neolithic culture that produced it. It was found near a smaller statue of a vulture, which could mean it has some connection with death. I mean, also the fact that it's a a skeletonized person holding their ding dong. I think death is a bit large for me. It's thought that it could be a way that humans at the time were starting to spiritually see themselves as being at the center of the animal world. This could be a form of shamanistic or shamanistic ritual, but the researchers are not venturing so far as to call it a religion. Ted Banning, who's an anthropologist from the University of Toronto, who wasn't involved in this research, thinks that these buildings were more likely to be houses than temples. So perhaps the statue could be, quote, an important ancestor associated with the building in which it was found. The fact that the figure is clutching its ding-dong is also consistent with this interpretation by potentially symbolizing that this person was the progenitor of a social group, such as a lineage or a clan associated with the building. So it's like, I am your great-great-grandfather. This is what made you. I'm holding it in my sweaty little skeleton hands. I mean, maybe. Banning does note that any interpretation of the statue is conjectural at this point. So, there we have a skeleton. The skeleton has his ding-dong in his lap. So if you come down the body, he's got his arms out and he's holding it with two hands. There are other images which show it in profile, where you do see it. The notion that it's somebody's great-great-grandpappy makes me uncomfortable. Makes me very uncomfortable. Continuing with phallic statues, we've got this guy. A crumbling, long-forgotten statue with an unusual erect phallus might be by Michelangelo. And I'm sorry, but the person who wrote this headline knew what they were doing. Renaissance scholars want hard evidence. Really? Okay. I see what you did there. The mainstream press has already accepted that this statue of Pan it should be attributed to Michelangelo. The New Yorker described it as, quote, a statue of Pan by Michelangelo in 2011 with no qualification. CBS News in 2017 said the Michelangelo sculpture in all his glory. CNN said earlier this year that it was unearthed as a Michelangelo, and the New York Post called it one of his masterpieces. However, Michelangelo scholars are more skeptical. William E. Wallace, not Braveheart, who is an author or editor of 8 books, viewed the statue in 2015, and he said that the sculpture was interesting, but, quote, not a great thing. He said the evidence that Michelangelo created it simply isn't there. Quote, they're hopeful it's Michelangelo because it'll sell for $50 million. If it's a garden sculpture by a nobody, it's $5,000. So there's a big difference by putting the name Michelangelo on it, but there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever that he has anything to do with this object. Whether further examination determines it's Michelangelo or not, there is no question it's an important sculpture that needs further preservation and study. So, there's that. And now we're going to go to the ding-dong of the other sense, people doing nonsense in places they shouldn't be doing nonsense, which sounds vulgar, but I don't mean it to be vulgar. This clownery. An ancient Neolithic passage tomb in County Sligo has been vandalised with words and spirals scratched into the stones. This is damage to one of the Carrickeel passage tombs. They are around 5,300 years old. The damage was found by a photographer and a prehistoric archaeology researcher called Ken Williams. He was at a conference of the Sligo Neolithic group, and he visited the tombs and came across these scratchings on the interior walls of the farthest tomb from the site's entrance. He said that their group did a tour there in the morning. He then went up there in the evening. They hadn't gone into the passage tomb that I found this in because it's the furthest one away. It's actually really awkward to get to. You've got to crawl in on your hands and knees. It's wet and dirty, so it's horrible to crawl into it. He said that the stone which formed an entrance to the cairn had also been knocked over. Quote, I mean, you're not just going to ramble in. You have to know that it's a passage tomb and you have to really want to go inside. So whoever did this seems to have gone deliberately to do it. It seems like it's definitely a deliberate attack as far as I can see. It's not the kind of case you can just wander and come across it, without knowing what it is. It's at the end of a dead end. You have to hike up to it. So I don't think you could go there and not know how significant they are. So it seems to be quite targeted. Why would somebody do this? Just ridiculous behavior. What a ding dong. And not in a funny way. Like, statues of phallus holders and Pan. That's the end of the ding dong. We are now moving on to our events and exhibition section. So let's start off as we mean to continue. Whoever is in charge, this is like in recent months, the exhibitions at the Getty have just been. I've still got my the Fantasy of the Middle Ages book. I think this is, and this book, the exhibition itself looked beautiful. And if the book's anything to go by, it absolutely must have been. I don't know if this is the same curator. I don't know who's in charge of this. If the person who did that in that cave is a child, then whoever their parents are need a big question, because that is not a safe place for a child to be exploring or examining themselves. So either a parent took their child in, hands and knees, into basically a potholing situation, or they just weren't supervising their kid as they crawled into the earth. So an unwatched toddler, call somebody. That needs a phone call to somebody in a position of authority. There is no, that is double scary. It's called The Fantasy of the Middle Ages, an epic journey through imaginary medieval worlds. And this is, it's a brilliant book. But this is another Getty exhibition that also, and they've got some of their items up on the website, and it looks super cool, the items they have. This opened in August. It's running through to January 28th, 2024 in LA. And we're told medieval scribes and artists, some of the world's first graphic designers. They planned individual pages and entire books in creative ways using handwritten text and painted decoration. And they have got a collection of texts in all different languages from all different cultures. And I just think this is a really fascinating exhibition. If you are near to LA and near to the Getty, this looks like a really cool way to spend your time. And I'm just very interested to know if it's the same person if they've got the same sort of medievalist in-house who's doing these exhibitions. Because if they have, they need a pay raise, because it always catches my attention, the stuff that they're putting out. Over to Barcelona now. This looks really interesting. This is the Museum of Forbidden Art. Works that have been censored, attacked, denounced, or removed from exhibitions has just opened in Barcelona. I think it's a really interesting museum to have created and curated, and I will be super interested if people get a chance to go and check it out on your thoughts of it. I should have said, with the Getty exhibition, with this, indeed, I believe with all of the exhibitions that we're talking about today, as well as having links to the exhibition where you can get tickets and stuff on the Opera Pinboard and also just in the description box, numbered, you will also find that I have got a link to the access or accessibility information. So if you have access needs, then do check that out, because I have linked that for your viewing pleasure and for your hopefully it'll be useful. For those who are in or going to be around Boston before the 7th of January, this looks really interesting. Strong Women in Renaissance Italy. This looks like a really great collection of art pieces, many of which have been loaned to create this exhibition. If you do get a chance, let us know what you think. If you get a chance to have a look at it, it looks really cool to me. I've got one in New York at the American Folk Art Museum, which I must confess I was not familiar with until I was sent this one. This exhibition, which opens November the 15th and runs till the 24th of March 2024, is called Unnamed Figures: Black Presence and Absence in the Early American North. So this is a really interesting exhibition that I'm not quite sure what classifies something as folk art. So if you know why that would be, please do feel free to let me know. I don't think I really know what folk art is, because I probably wouldn't necessarily see these paintings and think, oh, that's folk art. But that's probably because I don't really know what it means. And last but by no means least, the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery has got this exhibition, One Life Frederick Douglass, that is open now, and it's remaining open until the 21st of April 2024. And we have here the curatorial statement. This exhibition is organised into 7 sections, highlighting the long arc and significance of Frederick Douglass's life, from enslaved person and fugitive to internationally acclaimed abolitionist, women's rights activist, and statesman after the Civil War. So I think that's a really interesting kind of biographical art exhibition. I think that's a really cool way of doing it. So that is what I have for you for today. Well, friends, and we are coming in on just under 3 hours. So thank you once again for everybody who has sent me pieces of news to look at. Thank you for all of you who have been watching along live. Thank you for anybody who is watching on the playback. I do apologise for oversharing about my body art. I'll keep it to myself in the future, don't you worry. And I hope that you will join me for the live chat for Friday's video premiere, and we will be back again. I know it was 3 Mondays until this one. We're going to be going back to the every other Monday now, because I am not doing a half-term event, so we have more time. So I will see you not next Monday, but the Monday after, for another History News Live, and we will have a lovely chat. If you could please like this video, share it, make sure you subscribe to the channel, do hit the bell icon. Hopefully that means that YouTube will tell you when I'm next uploading or indeed going live. It doesn't always mean that they will. So as a fail-safe, please go to my website, www.katrinamarchand.com. Go to the contact page. On the contact page, you'll see a mailing list box. Please put your name, email in my mailing list. If you email the mailing list, you'll be added, and you will get a weekly mail shot telling you what's going on with the Friday upload. You will get early access to the little spoiler or teaser that I put out for it. And when there's going to be a History News Live, you will also get a link to that for the following Monday. When I'm doing new merch launches, that's also on the email shout. And for those of you who have missed it, I did put out some new t-shirts. I'm going to put that on a community tab post as well. So that's on my website now. We now have some t-shirts for merch. It's a Queen Victoria that does say Goth AF. I have it in black and white. I wore it over half term to the Tower of London, and I got lots of compliments from my pals, and they were all very impressed when I said, actually, it was my merch. They thought I'd bought it from some fashion store. But no, the fashion store is the Reading the Past merch store on my website. So I hope wherever you are on your Monday, you're going to have a great rest of your Monday. I hope you're going to have a fabulous week, whatever you're doing. And I look forward to speaking to you all in my next video. But for now, do take care of yourselves. Have a good one. And bye-bye.